All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Musa, and my project this summer has been using machine learning with a genetic algorithm for enhanced catalysis research. As many of you may have heard in recent years, machine learning has become a revolutionary tool in research and data science for its ability to process and interpret very large quantities of numbers faster than any human or non-machine learning algorithm can do. And my field of research, computational catalysis, is no exception to the benefactors of machine learning. But before I can get into exactly how machine learning helps out computational catalysis research, I have to go back into a little bit of background on my research first. So let's get to it. So catalysis. Catalysis is the industry I like to call the industry of other industries. Catalysis itself is over a $20 billion industry per year, producing chemical catalysts for use in other industries. Chemical catalysts appear in the production of over 90% of chemical goods produced globally every year. Catalysts appear frequently in oil refining and petroleum industries. They appear in the production of consumer goods, such as the production of water bottles, and they appear inside some consumer goods, such as the catalytic converter in car exhaust systems. So what is a chemical catalyst? A chemical catalyst is a chemical compound that speeds up the rate of a reaction without being consumed in the reaction. For example, the reaction between diatomic O2 oxygen and carbon monoxide, CO2, happens very slowly, but does happen in the air without the presence of a catalyst. Notice that for this reaction to proceed, a very large energy barrier must be overcome. This energy barrier is usually associated with the splitting of O2 atoms into single oxygen atoms. But in the presence of a catalyst, instead of one large energy barrier, you split that up into much smaller, much easily surmountable energy barriers spread out, which allow the reaction to proceed at a much faster rate without the catalyst being consumed. There are different types of catalysts. There are organic catalysts, such as enzymes, which appear in every living thing on Earth. There are homogeneous catalysts, which are typically organometallic complexes. Homogeneous means that the catalyst compound and the substrates, the chemicals that catalysts act upon, are in the same phase. This is Wilkinson's catalyst, and this would be a liquid acting on other liquid chemicals. Finally, there are heterogeneous catalysts, such as metal nanoclusters. This implies that the catalyst is in a different phase than the substrate it acts on, such as solid metal nanoclusters, like rhodium, acting upon gas reactions or liquid reactions. This specifically is the focus of my research this summer, metal nanocluster catalysis. More specifically, the system that I've been studying is these rhodium nanoclusters deposited and supported by a titanium dioxide surface. Commonly, you will find metal nanoclusters supported on both metal surfaces or metal oxide surfaces. Now, we can model these metal nanoclusters computationally using quantum mechanical calculations. With these quantum mechanical calculations, we study these metal nanoclusters' structure-property relations and reaction mechanisms. Basically, how these metal nanoclusters interact and catalyze substrates and reactions. This is an atomistic digital depiction of the same rhodium nanocluster on titanium dioxide surface as shown previously. It's the same as this, but digital. And this is a picture of the supercomputing cluster CORI by NERSC, the National Energy Resource and Science Computing Center, which is the Department of Energy project. This is the supercomputing cluster that we have to use to run these very expensive quantum mechanical calculations. Density functional theory, or DFT, is the primary quantum mechanical modeling method that we use in this lab and in computational chemistry, catalysis, and other forms of computational research to study these tiny nanoscale systems. DFT was refined by Walter Kohn and Lujia Sham in the 1960s, for which Dr. Walter Kohn and a colleague of his, Dr. John Perdue, shared the Nobel in Chemistry in 1998 for. It's a very groundbreaking theorem, and John Perdue is arguably one of the most popular scientists alive right now for just the sheer number of citations that his papers relating to DFT have. Essentially, you take a Schrodinger equation involving n many electrons, where you have to calculate point-to-point interactions between every electron and every other electron and every ion, into a much simpler, much more easily problem where instead of calculating the interactions between every single electron, you can take the electron density at any given point and use those for calculations instead. This allows much more flexible modeling of these systems and has paved the way for a lot of this research in this area. So we use DFT to study these structure property relations of nanoclusters. In practice, these nanocluster structures might take on a number of different forms due to conditions such as high temperatures and pressures in the presence of other molecules. In order to find and model what the structures of these reaction condition structured nanoclusters are, though, we need to first find the lowest energy structure in a vacuum. That is, the base structure that would be derived to form all of these structures. But DFT can only be used to find local minimum energy structures. It can't be used to find the lowest energy structure. So we must employ an algorithm specifically to find these lower energy structures so they can be modeled in more depth. We employ a genetic algorithm to do this. A genetic algorithm is a global optimization algorithm that emulates Darwinian evolution. The analogy would be you start with a population of individuals that get evaluated or selected over time, such as with natural selection, and the population of these individuals improves over time through crossover and mutation operations. In the context of biology, these crossover operations would be like sexual breeding, where you take the genetic material of two unique individuals and combine them to try and form a better individual. And mutation would be like spontaneous genetic mutation, where an individual's gene spontaneously or randomly changes, not necessarily in the hopes of a better offspring, but just to introduce randomness and variation within the gene pool. So, in the context of nanoclusters, individuals in this population would be different structures of nanoclusters. And for example, crossover operations might involve taking two unique nanoclusters, splitting them in half, and then taking opposite halves and combining them into a new structure to form a new individual. Mutation might just be shifting or rotating some of the atoms in the structure. Now, there are some constraints with this type of modeling. Using DFT within a genetic algorithm is extremely computationally expensive. And if you want to increase the accuracy of your calculations or increase the size of the system you want to model, then it does not scale linearly. It requires a much longer time for this optimization algorithm to run. But there has to be a faster way, right? So a couple of things we can do to the GA to improve it are general efficiency and workflow improvements to the code. But as I mentioned earlier, machine learning is extremely powerful in this respect. So once we've done all the efficiency and workflow improvements we can implement machine learning in it to speed up these DFT structure calculations. This is the proposed workflow of a genetic algorithm incorporating DFT and machine learning. I'll get into this now. So as with the base genetic algorithm, you start with initial population and relax all of the individuals with DFT. Now, you want to save this DFT data for later use though. What can this data be used for exactly? These DFT images can be used to train a machine learning model, which can then replace DFT calculations later in the algorithm's process. And there are a number of different ways that these machine learning calculations can be incorporated. For example, that formatting is a little bit off. These machine learning models can directly complement DFT structure optimizations. So if you take a random structure that you would normally relax with DFT, you can relax it with machine learning first, which can take 100 to 1,000 times less time, and then confirm for scientific accuracy the final structure with DFT again. A second method of using machine learning would be to screen a large number of candidates. Say you have a population of optimized individuals already. You can perform cross-mutation operations on them to produce a large pool of candidates, which can then be screened for energy and for fitness with this machine learning model so that you can select maybe the top 20 or top 100 candidates to investigate further with DFT. So what I've done this summer is implement these efficiency and workflow improvements to the genetic algorithm. The entire thing is written in Python and can run on any Python-enabled device in a test version without DFT. It's completely integrated with a software package called ASC, which is one of the gold standards in this field of research for modeling nanoscopic systems. And through ASC, there are a number of DFT calculators with which the user has complete control over the accuracy and precision of calculations with. And finally, the genetic algorithm can optimize both supported and unsupported systems. This is an animation of the various structures that the genetic algorithm found in its maiden voyage. of which this is the lowest energy structure that it found. There are 5 atoms on the bottom meshing with the lattice of the titanium dioxide support, with 3 atoms perched on top of the bottom 5. So how machine learning works in the context of computational research is that, well, generally, machine learning works by training a model using the inputs and the correct outputs of some mathematical function. So as you train it on these inputs and answers the problem, machine learning learns the connections from the beginning to the final. So if you feed it in new inputs that it hasn't seen before, it can predict the outputs of the same type of problem with reasonable accuracy. In the context of nanoclusters, you feed in some form of the coordinates of the structures that have already been calculated with DFT and therefore have forces and energies associated with them. You do this thousands of times so that when you feed in a new structure that it hasn't seen before, it can predict forces and energies for that structure. This is essentially the same thing that DFT does, except on the order of 100 to 1,000 times faster than DFT. So in conclusion, the GA is now more flexible and efficient and more easily used by researchers and users. I have trained a number of machine learning models and shown them to be significantly faster than DFT calculations. And once some issues with implementing machine learning into production for the genetic algorithm, this will lead to much faster investigations of catalytic systems, which will lead to more real-world discoveries. If you find a system that could be worth investigating experimentally, computationally, then you can send this system to your experimental friends and they can make the physical catalyst for you, which eventually leads to societal benefit in the form of better manufacturing or environmental pollution reduction, stuff like that. There's a lot of benefits to this type of research. Thank you. Are there any questions?
How accurate is your machine learning model in comparison to the DFT?
So DFT can be optimized for accuracy or speed. If you want to spend an inordinate amount of time getting purely accurate DFT calculations, then the machine learning model probably won't come close to the level of accuracy with that. But in order to ensure that your algorithm is producing accurate structures, you can relax a machine learning relaxed structure with DFT after it's already been relaxed, so that you get the speed of machine learning with the accuracy of DFT in a much shorter time scale. Any other questions? Good question. Yes, sir.
So it seems like in order to keep kind of the model tractable, you basically have to have mouse models, because you mentioned you were able to optimize the position of 5. But the entire catalyst is actually basically composed of lots of units that individual unit, is that right?
That is correct. So density functional theory, when these quantum mechanical calculations are done, you essentially define your system as one unit cell, and these calculations are done with a periodic boundary condition. That one cell is repeated in all directions infinitely, and then the potential energy and forces associated with the structure are derived from that implicitly infinite model. That is also very good question. Any other questions?
Do you have any useful explanation for why you choose that one optimized structure that might land on?
So there's some 3D perspective that isn't completely captured here. There's depth to some of these atoms, so there's like pockets on the surface where atoms of this nanocluster might like to sit in between. Quantum mechanical modeling typically just involves interactions between electrons. So if electrons are too close, they repel each other. If they're too far apart, they attract each other. So after evaluating these attractive and repulsive forces a number of times, this is essentially the structure that minimizes the forces on all the structures. All the repulsive and attractive forces are at their lowest in this structure.